on the ground looking at me. So use environmental portraits. I like environmental portraits in humans and in pets. I like this because you can see the sidewalk converging in the back, so it gives you a sense of depth here, and it also frames him really well.
It looks like late afternoon sunlight or something there.
Yeah, it is. It's like almost golden hour there, so the light was just really beautiful at that point.
Very cool.
Very soft lighting. Environmental portraits. Also, you can see a lot of the lines in the background. So earlier I was saying to pay attention to what's in the background. So if I could do this again, I would either zoom in a little bit closer on his face, or I would back up so that I wouldn't cut his little paws off there. But you know, things happen fast. There's another bow tie. That's a striped bow tie there.
One of the things that I think that we're seeing here, though, too, is that, you know, a lot of the time we try to be as responsive as we can, but rarely are things going to be perfect. You know, I mean, we're responding to our pets like we do to friends or family members. We respond to them in an emotional sort of way.
Yeah.
And so getting the moment, being responsive, is almost more important than getting it right. You know?
Yeah.
In terms of like composition or stuff like that. So the moment's the most important thing.
It really is. And this one, when I look at this photo, I remember where I was and what we were doing and what the air felt like. That's what the photos do for me. They trigger memories. And just to let you in on that, this is my old neighborhood in Austin, Texas. And I can't remember what time of year that this happens. These are all the crepe myrtle trees losing their flowers or their petals. So I want to say, you know, spring-ish, summer when this happens. It's just lush and green and beautiful. And Jax is having a fun time walking around. So warm, very, very warm. That's what photos do. They trigger memories. I think that's what I saw first in this photo when we were walking around, was how beautiful that would look in the background to create those colors back there. Okay, moving on. Environmental portraits here. He looks very alert and on guard. There must have been something happening. Maybe a squirrel that's not pictured. But what I wanted to point out here is there's still there's lines, so converging, offering depth back there, but also the bridge, which gives you a little peek into the other side of the bridge, what's going on over there, and the shape. So it's framing the whole scene in a way.
Well, I do like too that here you also went with the little bit lower angle of view. You know, you got down a little bit more to his level, and I think that makes a big difference here too. You know, the fact that we don't see the dog walker's head. I mean, this does feel almost that Elliot Erwitt-ish sort of picture.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's funny. I didn't realize until you said that I had totally cropped him off. Not intentional, you know, for any emotional reasons by any means. That's a good point, though. Yeah, very Elliot Erwitt. I love Elliot Erwitt's work. Okay, another environmental portrait. So here, the way that I view this photo, it actually reflects the mood that I was feeling whenever we went to the beach. This is a beach on the Gulf of Texas somewhere. I had just gone because I needed some time away, and he went with me because he goes everywhere with me. So I don't think that he's having the same emotional response to just relaxing on a beach, and it was cold and windy anyway, but it captured my feelings in this photo of him kind of peering out into the ocean. So I think we could also be aware of how our emotions are reflected in photography also. Yeah. He doesn't like to get in the water, but he likes to bark at the geese. I use the lines here to create kind of a portrait of him looking out. And I guess it's not technically a portrait because he's facing away, but the lines of the poles, there's three, in design, and I probably could have straightened that horizon now that I'm looking at it, but you always see something new whenever you're looking at him. But the threes and framing him right there in the rule of thirds. This one I thought was cute because earlier I said capture their personality, and his ears have so much personality, and the wind was blowing. This is on the edge of Lake Michigan, Chicago. So he's got his little strawberry bow tie on and looking out at the geese to bark at. So framing, we were just talking about kind of getting a low angle. I think what makes a really great pet portrait is to get on their eye level, because you see a lot of photos just from your perspective, and that's just not as inviting into the image. Right. Rule of thirds. So use your grid screen on the back. You can turn that on and off. I tend to keep mine on, I think. It's so second nature to me now that I don't know if I even have it on. But that's very helpful if you're trying to compose your image. If you're going for kind of a headshot style photo, I would say make sure to not cut off their ears if they have the ears that stand up. Leave some space there, just a little bit of space between the top. And, like a human, you would want to have like kind of their shoulders here. So there's a big difference between just cutting off their shoulders here and then cutting off their legs halfway down. There's a big difference in I think the composition there. Just cutting off way down here doesn't look as good. And if you're going for a full body shot, don't cut off the paws or the tail. Try to make sure that the tail is all the way in the frame. Yeah.
Because on that one, like you said there, don't cut off their paws or tail. I think it's an easy mistake for us to make doing that, because a lot of the time, we might have our cameras set to default to focus in the center of the frame. If we have just the center point chosen, it becomes real easy not to be as considerate of the paws or the tail. So definitely, focus on the dog, press the shutter button halfway, and then recompose to make sure that you do get all the tail and all the paws if you can, because I know I've taken similar shots of animals or of people, where you focus on them in the middle and then get this really sort of lopsided composition. So we're responding to our pets emotionally, but we still got to be thinking about our composition at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. Another kind of idea, if you're shooting pet portraits, you want a portrait of your pet, just a kind of different perspective would be to get super close, like do a side view and get their like eyelashes in it or something like that, so you get their real close details of their fur and stuff. And
what are the close-up lenses that Olympus has?
So actually a lot of them focus very closely. Even the zoom lenses do. So you can kind of get like 75 to 300, you can back up and zoom in and get those close. But if you wanted to do true macro, we have a 30 millimeter macro and a 60 millimeter macro, which would allow for very close focusing and super sharp, fine detail. They're very fun to play with. And also the TG6 that we had mentioned, does that very close focusing. So
very cool.
Yeah. And create your own background. So, if you want to create your own background, you can use so many different things around your house. You can use a sheet or a blanket, or if you have tulle lying around, I have these curtains that I use for a background here. You can just get creative with it. And like I said earlier, stuff in your background, even if it's blurred out, will create a shape, and it'll create shadows and highlights and color. So just pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
So just a few examples of these things that we just talked about. Eye level. Here's an example of getting eye level. So crouch down, get on the ground. Don't be afraid of getting on the ground or in the grass.
And again, that's another situation where having the articulated LCD screen is so valuable. Again, because it's a heck of a lot easier to get low to the ground when you don't have to get your whole body up to the viewfinder. And you can just hold it low and look at the screen is so helpful.
That's so true. And I actually think that's how I took this shot. I had the articulated screen flipped out so that I didn't have to get in the grass. This is actually in Texas. I'm very wary about getting in the grass in Texas because of fire ants. They are everywhere and very unpleasant. So yeah, that's the thing. That's when I moved to Chicago, I was very surprised in the summertime to see people sitting in the grass in the park. I was like, they're gonna get fire ants. What are they doing? Not a thing up here. So just fair warning, if you go to Texas, sit in the grass. It won't be pleasant. Okay, I digress. Kind of a headshot. This is like a side headshot. The dog is looking at me, kind of turned to the side. It's actually pretty backlit, so the background is blown out, but kind of the shoulders and head here. Oh, here's one from the same series. So headshot, cutting off at the shoulders and leaving enough space up top around the ears there. Same kind of lighting. I do believe on this one, I brought out a little bit of the shadow on the right so I could see his eye a little bit now that I'm looking at that. The other one was pretty dark. Full body shot. So there's plenty of space around the ears here. You've got all the paws there in focus, not cut off. There's interesting light from the left. So this dog has just got full black fur. But if you add some light to the side, you can create those reflective lights and add some dynamic depth to it. I don't know what the phrase I'm trying to find. You're adding depth. You're adding a lot of interest there.
Well, you're just pulling out more details. Dark dogs or cats can be so difficult to photograph. And so I think a lot of times people think that, at least they get frustrated when in just some normal lighting situation, they don't get a lot of detail in their pets. And this picture, I think, sort of shows well that, frankly, if you want more detail in your dark pet, you got to up your lighting game, and do some side lighting or stuff like this to bring out more detail on those dark animals. You have to.
Yeah, definitely. I do believe this was taken by my friend Tamra, her pup Jock. I believe they used flash or strobe here. I want to say flash with the softbox, but either way, it was a pop of light, not just constant light. However, I think you could get, if you don't, whatever your comfort level is with lighting, like I think you could still create some interesting light with a LED or constant light if you wanted to. So
I know, like, for instance, even at the store, we've got some small like handheld LED lights. I mean, I could see just keeping one of those in your bag even. You're holding your camera with one hand, holding this light with the other hand, just to put some side lighting onto your pet. That might be a good technique for some people.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great thing to have in your bag. You can always add a little light. I can't remember if I mentioned the catch light in his eyes, but I do like to see the catch light in eyes. You typically, and this goes for any eyes really, the catch light you would want above the horizon there, like on the top of the eye. There's philosophies and things behind that, which I won't get into, but it's kind of in the top corner, so it looks good. Full body shot. Now, I didn't cut the feet off, they're just hidden by the grass. I did have a note here that wolves are not pets. but I wanted to use this as an example because they're very, they look like a dog. So.
Yeah. And I liked it when you included this shot in your presentation, because this is from another event that Mike Ravello's did up in West Bend at the Shalom Zoo. So I was quite happy to see this picture in your presentation.
Yeah, that's a really great place to go shoot, which we should do again when it gets a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
Side note there. But, one thing that I do want to point out here is I gave you a few rules or guidelines or things to go by, tips and tricks to go by, and I said the rule of thirds. This totally breaks the rule of thirds, in my opinion, because it is dead center. I mean, there's thirds, I guess, if you want to divide it by like on horizontally in thirds. It's kind of that way. But typically you would want to kind of offset the face, the eyes somehow. But I just personally really like that it is front and center, staring me in the face.
The composition always, the subject should lend itself to the composition. This is as you said, a very straight, very frontal sort of gaze from the wolf there. So yeah, to make this be a centered picture completely makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The subject should determine the composition.
Yeah, I like that. I like that phrase. It's a very majestic animal. So